problems is solved, because if we don't tell you how to think, someone dumber on the internet will. My name is Jay, and our other resident solvers are Amanda, Deon, and Erin, who will offer a greeting now.
Hey there.
Hello.
How's it going?
Collectively, we produce the venerable, indispensable, not to mention award-winning podcast Best of the Left, where humans, that's us, curate progressive media on a chosen topic, creating episodes that are greater than the sum of their parts. On this show, we use those same curation skills to pull together stories and ideas that help us solve some of society's biggest problems. Today, we're looking at the do's and don'ts of political pushback, the current state of the gerontocracy of the Democratic Party, who've been dropping like flies recently, and what we can do about all of it. Then maybe a postscript about what the Democrats are saying they are going to do about it. First up on the list of things that won't work to turn back the tide of fascism, we go to the article from Current Affairs, Don't Expect Art to Save Us. And the article starts with a list of sort of asinine sounding statements about how art will save us or can save us in a variety of ways, but more specifically, like urging people to consume art and literature as a form of resistance in and of itself. And the point is that out of context of doing real political work, consumption of art turns out to be fairly impotent. My favorite quote from the article is quoting Kurt Vonnegut, so that's a good start. So Kurt Vonnegut said of the 60s, quote, "Every respectable artist in the country was against the Vietnam War. It was like a laser beam. We were all aimed in the same direction. The power of this weapon turns out to be that of a custard pie dropped from a stepladder 6 feet high." End quote.
Oh, no.
Which resonates in a way. I mean, this article gets into why we grasp at these kinds of ideas, but I think we know deep down they're not going to work. They're not going to do what we hope or dream they will do, but it's hard to not hope anyways. And then some people really let themselves get carried away. It begs the question, right? Like, art did not save them, referring to the 60s. It will not save us, the article says. So why do we keep thinking it will? And then they provide a series of examples of authoritarian regimes specifically attacking the arts. And it concludes in the article, if every terrible regime treats artists like a threat, artists naturally start to believe it. If the government is afraid of you, it stands to reason that you must be powerfully dangerous. But that's assuming authoritarians are driven by reason. They often aren't. Since the fall of the Roman Empire, most authoritarians have tended to ban gay sex, but having gay sex will not defeat fascism. That's probably the runner-up quote for me. Yeah, so this is like a problem with the left, I think, because the advocacy for art as resistance aligns so neatly with our beliefs about the importance of art and literature, and they are important, just not in the ways they often get talked about. Like, they can be in conjunction with real action, and they have their role to play for sure, but it's magical thinking to think like art is the answer or art is the weapon that will slay fascism.
So years ago on this show, before it was on YouTube, we used to do this before it was on YouTube. We were at the height of quote unquote cancel culture. And I was talking about how people are focusing much more on boycotting companies, calling for CEOs to resign, et cetera, because they don't have any other power. And they can't make change by yelling at Congress. Congress directly ignores the people. So what do you do when you're angry and still want to change things? You start focusing on what can be changed. Like, what do you have the power to change? In a capitalist country, that's companies that want to sell stuff to the public. They want money. You have the money. So that is your lever of power. And they are more likely to bend to public opposition and public opinion. So that feels successful, even though in the long run, it's not going to change anything on a systemic level, which is extremely sad. Like, I just see all of it as like a symptom of losing power. And it feels like that is what's happening now with art and artists in a different way. Like, we have no power. So who can we look to who upholds our ideals and might influence the culture? And that's understandable, but it makes just as little sense as raging at the companies when we need system change. It's upholding and, putting on a pedestal something that feels good, but is not actually going to move the needle. And, the article does say it's not that art is worthless. Art has value for its own sake. It will not topple fascism, but that's not art's job. This is from the article, nor should it be. It's our job. If art has any role to play in the struggle, it is to channel people towards collective action, not to act as a substitute for it. And that's how I feel about art. Art has a supporting role in movements. It's there to keep us going, to remind us that we should be fighting for a better world. It's there to remind us of the injustices on a regular basis, to shock us sometimes, to, make us uncomfortable, to criticize, all of those things. But it's not the end game. It never has been. And if you think about how art is used for propaganda in the evil way, it's to make you feel something that keeps you in line. And in a free society, art is meant to make you feel things that put you in touch with your humanity and keeps you looking towards a better future. I couldn't help but think about the bronze statue of a Black woman that just got put in Times Square recently. And, it's no one famous. It's a statue of a normal Black woman. And her face is neutral and her hand is on her hip. And of course, people flipped out, right? They lost their damn minds. Like Fox News was talking about this for days. And the right is calling it ugly and an angry Black woman, etc. She doesn't look angry at all to me, but whatever. And on the other side, we're saying it plays into stereotypes. And some others are saying like they're getting the symbolism. Like this is the whole point, right? The point was to put out something that should be extremely neutral and not that much of a lightning rod. And yet it is. And that was the artist's intention. And so the message was Black women's bodies, expressions, etc., are always up for discussion, critique, judgment. And that's good art. It called people out on their bullshit. It criticized. It did all the things it was intended to do. Whether you like it or hate it, spending your energy on getting it taken down or kept up is not going to change the underlying issue that the artist was trying to point to. Art is a message, and you take it from there and go make change.
With art, there's the issue that you talk about on the show all the time, Amanda, the Amanda principle. Mm-hmm. Because it can be interpreted any different way by multiple people. And I think we talked about this a lot on the last show, maybe the bonus part, where the right is using Star Wars and now they are on the side of the Empire and they're trying to twist it how the Empire might be right, but also that they're the rebels. And Star Wars is as basic, cut and dry as there possibly could be as far as art. It is commercial art, but it is a form of art, and people are taking the exact wrong lesson from it. And/or one of the most anti-imperialist shows ever produced is on Disney. It's on Disney Plus. So if Disney Plus is okay with it, Disney Plus being one of the biggest corporations that kind of forms culture in a way that is set up for oligarchy and has gotten us here, if that corporation is okay with and/or being on there, is and/or useful as a tool for mobilizing people to resist fascism? Probably not. Mm-hmm. Will it even be looked upon as anti-fascist in 20 years? Probably not. It'll probably be just something you can watch, and the lore of it and where Andor's from and the message of it could be completely missed. So there's a French filmmaker, Francois Truffaut. I think I'm saying it right. Truffaut. It's French. Look it up. But he's a French filmmaker who said years ago that there is truly no anti-war film. All films that are supposedly anti-war aren't anti-war, because once you start putting it up on screen, no matter what you do, you are kind of romanticizing, making it dramatic, creating a hero narrative. So even in your best effort to create this anti-war movie, you've kind of promoted the story of a hero. Yeah. So art has limitations, and the real work of fighting fascism is boring. It's a lot of effort, and it doesn't involve sitting and watching 9 hours of Andor or some anti-capitalist supposedly TV show. That could be good for you. You could enjoy it, but it doesn't actually translate into work being done.
No, definitely not. And this article has two quotes back to back that really drive that point home. They're quoting what they describe as an unapologetically leftist role-playing game, Disco Elysium. And they quote a character saying, "Capital has the ability to subsume all critiques into itself. Even those who would critique capital end up reinforcing it instead." It's a bit of a magic trick for the system to defend itself by disarming the critics, not by squashing, but by consuming, subsuming, repurposing.
It is hard to be alive when you just have people playing in your face, right? Like, I think that's the frustrating part, that it connects with audiences because they know these things to be true. But the fact that, yes, it creates this, I don't want to say submissiveness, but we're buying into the system that is ruining us. We're absolutely throwing our money at things. I mean, like J.K. Rowling. I've been thinking a lot lately about my relationship with Harry Potter and how I've contributed to the billionaire. But I mean, like, the thing is, a modern Nazi wrote a story of, like, dispelling Nazis. Like, you know, like when you break down the actual story, like, it is about a group that, like, this is super prejudiced against others. And there's a fight back, and, like, of course, good wins. And yet the actual person who's telling you that story is the same one discriminating against people and actively participating in a political system to make sure that there's legislation also discriminating against people. It is maddening. Yes.
Yeah. And I think to some degree, I do want to, like, delineate between what I would call commercial art that gets funneled through the capitalist pipeline to totally just, like, take out whatever seems like it might be offensive, and, like, artists who don't have that kind of piggy bank behind them, but are, you know, making art to provoke thought and put out a message. But the commercial art, like, it's not that there's not good commercial art, but you kind of have to watch all of it, consume all of it with this understanding that it exists in the water we swim in of capitalism. And so it is never going to be fully, like, the message is always going to be watered down. Like, it's never going to fully be what it could be or what it could have been if it was created outside of that system. But we live in a society, in a situation where that's the means. Capitalist giant corporations who are, you know, constantly, like, finger on the pulse of what might be offensive or what's going to reach the most people and what's going to be most mass marketable. Yeah, we can't really have true independent art. There's very few scenarios where that can exist. And this is also from many, many episodes ago. We read an article from Slate that talked about just the conflict of being a consumer of art and feeling constantly like if you don't pay for every single thing you love, then it's going to go away. And I pulled this quote from that article because it's really seemed to tie in. It said, quote, "To be a fan of the arts, of culture, or of any kind of product whose value goes beyond the economic is to be burdened with the responsibility for keeping it alive." And so, like, that's what we live in. We live in this situation where if you love art and you want artists to work and be paid for their work in a, you know, for its value, then you have to personally be kind of the patron, right? And, you know, they said that some of this is due to the pandemic. There was, like, a lot of, like, well, we have to make sure that we don't lose our artists during the pandemic. And so some of this is due to the pandemic and its endless aftermath. Some of this is just the latest turn of the economic screw. In a world choked by the ever-tightening grip of industries and capitalists determined to wring every last breath from it. But whatever it is, in 2023, that's the same in 2025, to be a fan of the arts, to be a consumer of culture, means living in a hostage situation where the success or failure of the thing you love is somehow perversely on you. And so not only is that going on, but then we're like, also it's your duty as a fighter of fascism to consume the art and pay for the art, and the whole cycle gets even more intense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole thing, I couldn't help but think of the old Audre Lorde quote about, which he says, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." Yeah. And I thought, like, how easy would that be to misconstrue what that means, right? That like, it doesn't mean that, like taking a nap in the afternoon is anti-fascist. There's like connections there about how like taking care of yourself, giving yourself, your body, your mind, spirit, what it needs to, survive in its context so that you can continue the fight. Like they're connected, they're intimately connected. And that's, very much what the connection is with art. Like art is there to preserve us, to inspire us, to, urge us to keep going, to, reinvigorate us or something. But it is not the act of fighting back itself. And to accidentally blend them and to believe that like caring for myself is political warfare. We're at war. I'd better like go to the gym and work out and like eat well. Yeah, that's okay. Great. But like, we need politics. We need collective action. There's no way around what we are facing that does not involve on the ground organizing action. That's what has to happen. Yeah. And the article sort of attempts to explain why we gravitate towards this magical thinking. And Amanda, you alluded to it early on. It says, the idea that art will save us is the kind of magical thinking that flourishes when people feel helpless. And it talks about how the book, The Secret, that claims we can manifest our desires without working for them, gained popularity in the wake of the 2008 economic crash. And it is so tied into, there's a theory I've been pushing for a long time about the large political eras. Like the left used to be good at pushing for economic populism. The whole New Deal era was about collective economic populism. And then we sort of fell off that wagon, but there were structural reasons why that happened. When we started hitting roadblocks that didn't allow us to continue pushing for economic populism, that's what helped the pivot toward social issues. So it gave like a great boost to like the marriage equality movement. So that's good, but it feels like one came at the expense of the other, when obviously we need to do both. We need economics, we need social equality, we need human rights and all that. And it has so much to do with people gravitating toward what is possible or what feels possible. So when we got blocked on economics, we pivoted to the social because that felt more possible. And we made a lot of progress, and that was great. But then when we get blocked in that way, or we feel genuinely hopeless in all directions, that's when we completely flail and start looking for magical solutions in the hopes that something will work. And that's kind of why we need articles like this. It's like the cold water in the face. Mm-hmm. Sorry, dude. There isn't a shortcut. There isn't a magical solution. There's hard work. We're in a shitty spot. There's nothing to be done about it, but suck it up. So let's get going.
We talked a lot about the art, and I just want to quick call into the artist because I do believe that was in the article as well. So specifically, I'm going to reference Chapel Rowan. During the 2024 campaign run, she kind of diverted from the Democratic Party and didn't support Kamala Harris because of the stance on Gaza. But a lot of the conversation around it, like she was an easy scapegoat, someone to point to, instead of recognizing that, yes, she's an artist that has a platform, and you can absolutely use that to be a microphone, if you will, to help amplify, and also you're allowed to have an opinion. But why would the ownership of winning voters be on any artist, regardless of how big their audience is? I do think it's kind of what Jay is talking about, where you feel powerless, and for some reason in our society, we do feel like celebrities are more accessible, which that is sad. Yeah. That you feel a stronger connection with that than your representatives that actually work for you. Right. But we're leaning on those celebrities, and again, why would it ever be on them? It's absolutely the Democratic Party and the candidates' job to win votes. It has nothing to do with celebrities. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's same with Taylor Swift, right? Everyone's like, when is she going to endorse Kamala Harris? It's like, what do you think is going to happen if she does that? Is that going to make everything okay? No. No, it's not.
But she is actually a good example of translating it into movement, which is like she does encourage people to register
to vote. Sure.
But again, like that is the least, like that is what you can expect of a celebrity. That is the power that she has accessible to her.
Yeah, that's why the Rock the Vote campaign was all about celebrity, right? Because you could influence somebody to maybe take that action, but you can't you can't have them say, I'm going to support this person and then make those person's policies actually attractive to voters. You know, the line is not, that is not the follow through.
So the article sort of concludes with the examples that make the point, right? So it says, the protest art of the 1960s existed alongside fierce organized political action, demonstrations and boycotts and campus revolts and the occasional riot. The labor movement of the early 20th century had folk songs, yes, but it also had wobblies throwing bricks at strikebreakers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always there. Like the art is there and it's good, but it's the sidecar. Just don't let yourself get tricked. They also, I mean, it's a complicated criticism. They bring in the nature of artists themselves who advocate for purchasing their art for the sake of political resistance. And like, that's just capitalism talking, you know. I mean, you can blame the individual artist for doing that and sort of misleading people that purchasing their art is an act of rebellion, but also they're swimming in this water. They're trying to survive on their art. And so you can sort of understand why people do that, but just like, you just got to go into all of it clear-eyed and not get tricked in any direction.
Just one quick last thing. I just want to say that, like, because we didn't get into it, you know, the National Endowment for the Arts is being slashed. I can't remember the name of the agency right now, but the agency that helped libraries and museums, that is getting cut completely. And there was a bill in Texas recently that would have allowed people to personally sue bookstores if they sold books that, quote unquote, harmed children. And luckily that got knocked down. But there are things that are connected to art that we need to fight for to make sure we still have the art.
Up next, something else to not do when figuring out how to resist, putting your passive faith in a political party, which brings us to another current affairs article, The Problem Goes Well Beyond Biden, and discussing in quite a bit of depth the new book, Original Sin, about Biden's decision to run for re-election. It starts with lots of horrifying details from the book that have been widely reported, but then gets to this. This is the core of what's important about the full arc of the Biden story from 2020 onward. It says, the only reason Biden became the candidate at all in 2020 was that the Democratic establishment successfully rallied to stop Bernie Sanders. Biden was the candidate of last resort for the establishment, who were determined to avoid a Sanders nomination at all costs, because Bernie's social democratic agenda posed an economic threat to the donor class. The late Senator Mike Gravel, or more precisely the teenagers he entrusted to be his voice on Twitter, presciently warned in 2019 that, quote, if Democrats nominate Joe Biden, he may win, and we'll have 4 years of weak, feckless Democratic leadership. And then, in 4 years, he'll be defeated by a Republican Party even more openly white nationalist. If you nominate an Obama redux, you'll get a worse Trump redux. And so here we are with our worse Trump redux.
I was going to say, good thing that didn't happen.
Oh, sorry. I
dodged the bullet.
I have bad news for you, Deon.
Oh. I've only been watching Star Wars, so I haven't been paying attention to the news.
I mean, you know, self-care. You do what you got to do. Now, the only thing I want to add to that quote to like complicate things a little bit is about the line about Bernie's social democratic agenda posing a threat to the donor class. Like, that's obviously true, but I want to add to it. I don't think it's wise to discount how truly and deeply in their bones some older liberals feel about the concept of socialism when they hear the word. It's not rational, but it is understandable if you know where they're coming from. And I mean, honestly, I wish more people would come out and be more honest about it, because when Chris Matthews said what he really felt in 2020, it was extremely clarifying. So their concerns about Bernie feel so much deeper than just money, because the Trump element was a known element. They knew what that was going to be like. I mean, we knew in 2016 what it was going to be like. By 2020, we definitely knew. And the idea that they would hedge on like, well, you know, Bernie Sanders or Trump, which would be worse? Like that, I just can't believe that people are that afraid of being taxed. If you're a liberal donor, you're donating to the Democratic Party. It can't just be about money. And so to that point, here is what Chris Matthews said following a Democratic debate in 2020.
I have my own views of the word socialist, and I'll be glad to share them with you in private. And they go back to the early 1950s. I have an attitude about them. I remember the Cold War. I have an attitude towards Castro. I believe if Castro and the Reds had won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park, and I might have been one of the ones getting executed. And certain other people would be there cheering, okay? So I have a problem with people who took the other side. I don't know who Bernie supports over these years. I don't know what he means by social. One week it's Denmark. We're going to be like Denmark. Okay, that's harmless. That's basically a capitalist country with a lot of good social welfare programs. Denmark is harmless.
It's pretty clearly in the Denmark category, yeah.
Are you sure? How do you know? Did he tell you that?
Well, I mean, that's what he says, and that's what his agenda calls for, right?
Yeah.
He's not calling for any...
Let's see. Let's figure that one out.
Well, we haven't seen a campaign yet where video of him praising the other version, which is Castro, has been used. Well, but it will be used.
That's a question
of how that plays.
Of how what the effect that has.
Well, what does he think of Castro? That's a great question. What did you think of Fidel Ismo? We all thought he was great when he first. I thought he was cheering like mad for him when he first went in, and then he became a communist and started shooting every one of his enemies.
Good God, I forgot about how unhinged.
Yeah, I forgot too.
My favorite line from that little rant is Matthews saying, one week it's Denmark, but then not adding like, and then the next week it's, because if you're talking about Bernie, it'd be like, and then the next week he said the same thing. And then if you look at what he said
Right.
5 years ago, it was the same thing. And then I saw this clip from 40 years ago. He was talking about the same thing. But like, what does he really think? We need to figure that out.
That's the threat.
Like that is a deep, like, you know, this is a product of the years that Matthews lived, right? And it's not ageism to point out that his experiences in his life dating back to the 50s no longer fit the world well enough for him to accurately assess the world of politics today. And he's not feeble-minded due to age. It's not that. It's just that he's out of touch because of his experiences. Like that's a natural process. And so, I mean, that was ridiculous. I remember the calls for him to be fired started with that. He later went on to compare Bernie Sanders winning the state of Nevada to the Nazi defeat of France. And that's what finally did it. That's what got him kicked off MSNBC.
Yeah.
But like, I have to believe that these older liberals who lived through the Cold War, you know, like congratulations to them that they're not Republican Cold Warriors, because, you know, the Republican Party is all anti-communist all the time, McCarthyism, because they all grew up in the Cold War. So if you grew up in the Cold War and you still ended up a Democrat, good for you. Congratulations. But that's only going to take you so far. And I think Chris Matthews is really indicative of a line of thinking that people don't usually come out and say. They're not like, well, I'm worried about Bernie Sanders. I think I might rather have Trump in office because Bernie Sanders might line me up against a wall and kill me and all my friends. Like, they don't say that out loud.
But Chris Matthews did.
But Chris Matthews did. And I think that that's in the back of a lot of people's minds. It doesn't make any sense. It's not rational. It's not connected to reality, but it's connected to their reality. Like, that's how they really feel.
To have that understanding, though, and not to draw comparisons between how Republicans and specifically Trump reference liberals and the threat of the elite and, you know, the secret Washington insiders, like to not be able to make the leap of they're being targeted and viewed as the enemy within whatever, like you think that comparison would come natural. But of course, it's like honed in specifically for Bernie, even though he's one of the most consistent politicians like across the board, which I think is one of the threats of him specifically.
So we just had a whole section talking about how art has limitations and it, you know, it's not a substitute for actually doing something, but certain kind of art, and maybe it's not all art, but propaganda fucking works. It works very well. And the propaganda of decades and decades and decades of saying communism, socialism, evil, communism, socialism, evil. It's just the baseline for that age group type person. Like Chris Matthews was being fully honest, and I wouldn't be shocked if every single Democrat his age feels almost exactly the same. And it's not necessarily their fault, because that's what they were fed their whole lives. So why wouldn't they believe that? To fight back against that, decades and decades and decades of programming is a real uphill battle. And we're going through it again. We've got new Red Scare. And new Red Scare is, I mean, kind of pick your poison. Free Palestine, that is the new scary buzzword at the moment. So that's being used as a new cudgel. And if you say something like that, well, then clearly you want to do terrorism. You want to do genocide.
And they explicitly tie the fight for Palestine to communists.
Yeah.
It's not even subtle. It's not like a new version. They've just tied it directly together. That
what do they call it? They call it cultural Marxism, which used to be code word for Jewish, and now is just code word for anything left of, I don't know, I guess Jill Biden, not Joe Biden.
Yeah. So I get on far right mailing lists a fair amount because of the show. So just yesterday, I got a message from one of those far right, like, this is our freedom minute for the week or whatever. And it was all about the communism of the Palestine movement. It wasn't cultural Marxism, soften our language. It was the Palestinians and their communist allies.
And it works. It's just an open kind of nerve that can be pushed over and over again, because of America, we never really actually deal with our past and heal and move forward. It's just kind of papered over, ignored, moved on, or completely accepted and just internalized and not discussed anymore. And then when you start talking about it in these contexts where, I mean, this show's called Best of the Left.
No, it isn't.
Well, this show is called Solved.
Okay.
This show is called Solved.
This show is called Solved. The show that we produce is called Best of the Left. And
available anywhere you get your podcast.
Yeah. That automatically brings up some ideas in some people's heads about what we mean by that. Chris Matthews, in the back of his mind, probably thinks it means we want to round him up and kill him in Central Park or whatever, which that's, I mean, I don't even know how you begin to have a conversation with someone who feels that way.
It's tough. They tried. That MSNBC panel tried to talk him down.
Yeah, Chris Hayes was just like, what's wrong with you?
Grandpa, calm down.
Yeah. Just, like, we're on TV, man. Just take it easy.
It's not just on TV. They're on a stage in front of an audience.
I know.
He wasn't even just saying that into camera.
He was trying so hard and just kept on.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what we're seeing is, and what we're getting at more broadly, is this generational divide and the inability for older Democrats, not because they're old and their brains don't work, but because they're old and their perspective is wildly different from younger people, is that they can't quite recognize that we're entering a new era of politics. I mean, we're in it. We're in a new era of politics, but we spent the last decade entering it, and that it requires a new type of politics to continue to exist in this new world. It's reminding me of that quote. I think we brought it up kind of recently. The old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. And in taking the metaphor of something struggling to be born, we use the same word to describe taking political action as what you would say to someone attempting to give birth. Push. That's the action. Like, actual action is we have to keep pushing. But it feels like we're stuck. It feels like we're in this position where the Democratic Party is stuck. The gerontocracy refuses to release the reins of power, but we're not going to be here forever. We are absolutely not going to be here forever. And that is sort of the hope that I'm hanging on to, is like, I can see how there could be a future beyond where we are right now. I didn't pull the quote, but I think this same article talks about how the last time the Democrats were in as bad of a situation as they are now was 2005. And by 2008, they had a governing trifecta and a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. Like, the George W. Bush administration was so unpopular, and rightfully so, but I can't imagine that, people think back to George W. Bush and are like, oh yeah, like, remember when like honorable people were committing war crimes instead of this wildly dishonorable person? So the backlash to the George W. Bush era should, if anything is logical about the world, pale in comparison to the backlash to the Trump era. The idea that we can't get beyond where we are, I think, is absolutely wrong. And I think the Democratic Party is sort of like a writ small version of America as a whole, in that we like to do things wrong in every way possible before finally finding the thing that works. And there are a lot of people fighting back for a lot of structural reasons that we're discussing, but the writing is on the wall, and it's just taking a painfully long time to get people to either recognize the change or, unfortunately, like, I don't mean it in a morbid way, but like, they're old enough that they're dying off, and people with a different perspective are going to come in. Whether we fight for that to happen sooner or it happens naturally later, it's going to happen.
So, related to this very much, I have noticed, especially in response to this new Jake Tapper book, Original Sin, about Biden and the Democratic Party and the struggle, there is some pretty like visceral reaction to this book from the left. And I mean, from hardcore Democrats, let's call them that. And they're really angry that this book is coming out right now because they don't want to tarnish Biden. Like, there are varying degrees of this, and there's different reasons for being annoyed with the whole Jake Tapper book. But that's one of them I see online very often. Like, how dare you criticize Joe Biden, right? Because I have a little bit of a platform here, I just want to say something to those people if they're listening. If you do not understand that Joe Biden and what the Democratic Party did needs to be evaluated, is the lightest term I would use, that there needs to be some analysis of why things went down the way they did, maybe blame to some degree to cast around. If you think that that is just horrible, you are no better than the MAGA cult. I mean that like very, very seriously, because if you just want to be blind to the problems and the things that happened that were wrong in your own party, you are doing the same thing that MAGA cultists are doing. They don't want to look at anything that is wrong or bad or immoral or anything like that because they're sycophants. So we don't want to be like that on the left. And I think people are uncomfortable with this whole conversation of saying, like, what did the Democrats do wrong? Because they think that it shows weakness to the other side at a time where we need to be unified and strong against Trump. We will never, ever, ever, ever beat Trump and the fascists if we do not assess what the hell happened and what we need to do differently. It'll never happen if we don't go through this process. And this book is, to some degree, part of that process, whether or not you like it or not. Are they breathlessly hawking it on CNN every 5 minutes? And is that ridiculous? Yes, absolutely. But there are some things to learn from some of the things that are in this book. There are things to learn from politicians who decided not to be brave at a time where they should have been brave. I deeply blame Democrats for where we are right now. I do. I deeply blame them. And I want to see this party change course dramatically. The only way we do that, the only way we put ourselves in a winning position, is to acknowledge the shit that went down, the stupid stuff that happened, the fear-mongering within the party where people were afraid to say anything, even though they felt that maybe Joe Biden wasn't the right person to be the candidate. All of that needs to be put in a spotlight, dissected, and then we need to move forward in a different way. And if you don't want to have that conversation, sorry, you're no better than the people who want to ignore all the bad things that Trump is doing.
I think there's a lot of really valid criticisms of the book and the timing and, like you were saying, hawking it on CNN and all the things that go along with it. those criticisms that you're talking about, how dare they say this about Biden, kind of mirrors a lot of conversations about a lot of privilege that are going on in society right now, where do people actually want equality, or do they want to be treated like the people who are at top right now? Do you want equality for all, or do you just want the privilege that other people have? Do you want the Democratic Party to be better, or do you want it just to be held to the low standard that the Republicans are?
Right, exactly.
If that's the bar, well, we're already screwed. That's it. If no one has any bar, then that's it. There will be no better way forward, because no one will have a reason or motivation to do better. Both parties will be equally corrupt. What you really want is, and this is the problem I have with Jake Tapper, and I've seen him on a lot of shows and doing interviews, hawking the book, is he seems like he has a lot more heat for the Biden camp and Hunter Biden specifically than he seems to have for Trump. And maybe, I don't watch CNN, so maybe he does. And I don't want to say that because I could be wrong. But it doesn't appear that he has as much animosity or is doing as good a journalism as this book may be in regards to the Trump administration. And I know that it is hard to hold the Trump administration accountable because they're so over the top. They're so blatant. They do things in our face.
They don't give a shit.
And they don't care. You're not going to hold them accountable. But at some point, we need to start holding Americans accountable. I think a lot of times we talk about, there's a Trump problem, there's a Republican problem. There's an American citizens problem. We have a problem with a lot of people in the country thinking that it's okay for my team to be shitty. And that crosses over into that, what you're saying, like the kind of blue MAGA. That's not what we want. We need a bar that they all have to reach. And right now, it seems like the argument is, let's just get rid of the bar. Let's fight like they do. I don't want that.
I don't either.
Well, I also think what you're talking about with like people. So I've been making the connection. We talked about artists and like putting them up. We kind of do that with politicians as well. Like we definitely want to elect them and just go about our days and never have to tune in again, never have to apply pressure. And I think that we invest very heavily in politicians who align pretty accurately with our belief system, thinking that they'll go off to Congress and they can spend 8+ years there and like not veer from the course that they had in their original campaign. Of course, we need to apply pressure. Being a citizen is being an active one. You have to continue and you have to check in, because if you're not holding them accountable, who will? Like, who will? I hope desperately for campaign finance reform. I hope that we get to the place where we're putting caps on this and we're actually making regulations to hold our representatives accountable. But at the end of the day, the fail-safe is the people. Like, we do have power, whether they want to make you believe you have that power or not.
I feel like I have more sympathy for some of the people in that Original Sin book who are getting a lot of blame right now. They were like the Biden insiders who could have spoken out. It's not like his absolute core group of family sycophants and groupthink people, but the surrogates, the people who knew that what they were saying was not true, but they were going to stand up and defend him anyway. They're getting a lot of blame heaped on them. I mean, of course, a lot of them were quoted anonymously in the book, and so we don't know exactly who they are, but you can take some guesses. And I have more sympathy for them because of the nature of the collective action problem that they found themselves in the middle of, right? Like, some people are criticizing them, very explicitly saying Joe Biden was their meal ticket, so they weren't going to turn on him. Mm-hmm. And that's not untrue. It's just also true that if they turned on him, it would have had absolutely no impact, and they would have been committing career suicide. Like, that is true. So the only way they could have effectively taken action is collectively. They would have had to have gotten together,
band together,
organized, what would have been called a coup. Like, it would have been seen as this horrific, deep betrayal. Maybe history would, and like people like us would have been like, oh, thank goodness someone did it. But within their group, like within the Biden group and within Biden supporters and the people they work with, like a lot of people would have seen them as like backstabbers and betrayers and whatnot. It was an extremely difficult situation to be in. And like, I remember having this thought at the time. I mean, like, we have a small show. I wasn't worried about us moving public opinion very much, but I sort of had the thought during the years of Biden's administration, like, am I going to make shows about Joe Biden being old? If he was going to change his mind, he would have already done it. If he was going to step aside, he would have already done it. He's not stepping aside. So like, what's even the point? And I've got a finite amount of time to focus on issues we want to focus on. And it just didn't feel like a worthwhile use of time or energy until the debate. That's what changed the entire dynamic. And then everyone flipped on him. And the reason it worked is because it broke the dam of the collective action problem. So understanding those dynamics, I think, is key to understanding individual people's actions. And they're not all like selfish and liars and just looking out for their own meal ticket. And like, that's so overly simplified. But the collective action problem is a real one. And what I was getting to this whole time is that, like, Amanda, you were talking about like the culture of it, right? And those who are still to this day trying to defend Joe Biden, to continue to defend Biden now is to argue that we need to have systems in place that create the collective action problems that got us stuck in that situation to begin with. And what we need instead is a completely different culture that's not about backstabbing and not about ruthlessness, but about like a culture of democracy where to challenge a fellow Democrat is not seen as backstabbing. I advocated long ago and will again that it should be in the culture of the party that a sitting president must face an actual primary if they want to run again.
Absolutely.
And it shouldn't be people who are like timidly, oh, I don't want to like offend the king. I'm just going to pretend to run, but actually we all, support him. Like, no, we need dynamism. We just need actual democracy to do what democracy does. Well, let's get to the next article, which is from The Nation. The Democratic Party is literally dying, and gets into Jerry Connolly, who beat AOC for a leadership position and then promptly died, right? And he's the third of the 215 House Democrats who have died this year. And what does it say? 6 have died since April 2024. And this is having actual impacts on actual legislation. The bills that are being passed now through the House could have been blocked if there were Democrats in those seats had they not died effectively of old age. And the core of this article is that it gets to the culture of the Democratic Party, which is all about waiting your turn and appreciating seniority and just being a patient ladder climber. That is the opposite of dynamism. That is the opposite of a healthy culture of competition that allows good people who excite their constituents, who actually excite people to go vote. Those people get stuck in the waiting your turn and just waiting for, maybe when I'm 75, I'll get to be in leadership. Like, that doesn't excite people. So it's not surprising that no one's excited about the Democratic Party when they've created structures that make it impossible for the party itself to be exciting. And that's the connective tissue for all of this, from everything Amanda was saying about culture to the culture surrounding Biden to the culture of the entire party.
As you guys all know, the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to be in the finals. They're super.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah, you guys, I got you guys at the edge of your seat. I know it.
What sport are we talking about?
Basketball. NBA finals. But they're young. The history of the NBA, older teams beat the younger teams. But this team, if they win the championship, will be the youngest team since 1977, the Portland Trail Blazers. Obviously, you guys knew that. And
obviously.
Yeah. But I think there's been this pushback in the sports media that they would win because of their youth, because young teams don't win, because they can't win. You got to have all this experience to win. But sometimes young people are better at things. They aren't necessarily better just because they're younger, but sometimes they are. Sometimes they're better than the older people. And the Democratic Party has decided that that is not possible. It couldn't possibly be true that someone younger is better than someone older. I can't remember if it was in this article or just something else I read, but Jerry Conley specifically, when asked about why he should be in this role instead of AOC, said, well, I've never had a chance to be in leadership role before, so it was kind of my turn. That's the terrible reason for him to be in any
Not
position. It's terrible. Seniority has its place, obviously, but not in democracy. In democracy, you want the best people in the role all the time, and it's never going to happen. There's no such thing as true democracy. You're never going to find the best person every single time, but you can find a better person, especially if someone's been there a long time and hasn't done anything. That makes it really easy to move on to the next. And maybe the next person could be worse, but you don't know. And the Democratic Party is kind of stuck in this stasis right now. And we don't know if younger Democrats could be better because there isn't any room for them to move up.
And you know what would happen if it turned out they weren't better? You'd vote them out the next time.
Exactly.
You'd have more democracy that would take place the very next time around.
Yeah. The other piece of this is like, it really isn't just about age. It is about holding the old line. Like the old guard holds the line in terms of what they think politics is and what it should be. And I don't know if it was this article or another one we read that said they're waiting for the old political dynamics to return. That summed up for me their view more than anything else. They're just hoping, fingers crossed, everything will go back to quote unquote normal, whatever they think that is. That is never going to happen. What the young people know that the older people do not is that that's never going to happen. And that we're in a new world, in a new paradigm, and that younger people have come of age in this new paradigm and understand it more than the old guard ever will. And that's just true. And that really doesn't have much to do with age in terms of how capable you are. It's just that times change. Generations get stuck in their ways. Like, this is how it happens. And so you have to make room. You have to make room. This is ridiculous. Honestly, this whole thing just enraged me. And it's not something that I don't already know. But when you hear what they say about it when asked, that's what pisses me off the most. Because they say things like, well, I really want to be in leadership. I haven't been in leadership yet. Who the fuck cares? I don't fucking care about your personal aspirations. Shut up. Like, goddamn.
And it's worse because it's not just about the aspirations. So there's this important quote. It says, earlier this month, David Hogg, the controversial vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, stirred up anger by going on Real Time with Bill Maher and saying, quote, there have been a few members that have come out that have said, if I retire, my life is effectively over. Yeah. And Hogg concluded, get over yourself. This isn't about you. And he went on, and the article continues. It says, in his comments on Real Time, Hogg alluded to a comment Representative James Clyburn, age 84, made when asked by the Wall Street Journal about retirement. What do you want? Me to give up my life? And then I love this. Last week, when asked about this comment, Clyburn denied he ever made it, but then expressed the same sentiment in an even more extreme form. Like, boy, that is the worst version of debunking, is be like, I never said that. I'll say it worse. He said, do you want me to commit suicide? Oof. If you force me out of my job at the age of 84, I will metaphorically, or I don't know if he meant it metaphorically, commit suicide.
Yeah. What I said to Jay when he told me that was, that is what a toxic partner says to someone who's threatening to leave them.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a healthy scenario.
Exactly.
First of all, do these people not have families? Do they not have friends? Do they not, like, what on earth is going on? Like, it makes me sad for them. And also, like, look, I don't like to generationally sweep, but boomers have this fear of being, quote unquote, useless or, you know, like, put out to pasture more than any other generation, I feel like. They're terrified of it. And I feel for them, and I'm sorry the world made you this way. I'm sorry they sent you that message that age means you are no longer useful in society. You can have a lovely impact in different ways after your career. Good God, this is messed up.
You're a representative, which means you're a figurehead. And not in the sense that you don't have power, but in the sense that your job is literally to translate what your constituents' will is.
Yes, it's not about you. Yes.
No,
yes.
But because of American culture, of course, we have created, egos that are involved in the politics. And that's what this is. And you're exactly right, Amanda. I was going to say this is so indicative of our culture. As we spoke about Chris Matthews, like living through the Cold War, I do think that this is a generational thing. Like we're seeing boomers not want to retire. And it has to do with messaging. It's completely the American way to find only value in your work. And you've created dynamics and relationships with the people around you that center around your value being work related. So I definitely think that you're right, that it just is one ego, like you're a figurehead. Like you need to really get in touch with that. David Hogg going after it, good for him. Like we needed that perspective. Like somebody had to say it.
We're talking about culture and we can't blame these individuals. This is the society they grew up in. Like 1989, Francis Fukuyama book, The End of History quote, that they really believed at the end of the Cold War, America was just going to be in charge forever. And it's just going to be how it is. You don't have to have good ideas because this is just the way it is now. They didn't have to flex a muscle of learning how to deal with things. Like it's not their fault. And there are people among them who did not agree with that. Obviously, we can always point to Bernie. Bernie does not fit this model at all. He's been saying the same stuff for a long time. Maybe because he's even older. But that's why we need a culture of democracy to check these people despite themselves. Because like they're not going to do the right thing. Clyburn's not stepping down. He's not going to lose. That's another part of the problem because the whole structure is set up to keep him in place because there's just so much money behind him in the way that the Democratic Party structure is set up. The incumbents win. Incumbents have the machine behind them. So until we change that.
Yeah, you're reminding me how angry I got when I looked up, a variety of ideas on Democratic Party reforms. One of the big ones is like self-imposed term limits, at least for leadership. And it doesn't have to be a law. It doesn't have to say that all members of Congress have term limits. It's totally within the Democratic Party's power to impose this on themselves. And the older Democrats are all against it for the most part. They had a big debate about it in 2018 and it sort of fizzled out. And now it's back with a fucking vengeance, as it should be. But the older Democrats, it was like Steny Hoyer was being quoted and a couple of others. And the line they use is, we don't need term limits. I already have term limits. It's every 2 years.
Yeah.
No, dude.
Yeah.
You don't get to pretend like
with your thumb on the scale.
Yeah, like you've been in Congress for 35 years or 50 years, some of them. Like you don't get to pretend like people could vote me out anytime. Like that's just not how it works. And that's not how it works. Therefore, that's a bullshit argument.
But I think like extending the point to include like we would lose a lot of good warriors and we're still advocating for this. Bernie would fall off. He would probably have reached his term limits. Same with like Barbara Lee. So, I mean, we would lose people that we all respect and we're still advocating, which I think emphasizes the need for this.
Mm-hmm. People need to feel that it's not their job, like personally their job. It is just a position you hold. This is what good presidents have said throughout history. I'm just holding the seat. I'm warming the seat for a little while, like this isn't mine. That needs to be the same attitude for all of Congress. I'm warming the seat until it's my time to go. And, I'm going to do the best job I can while I'm here. That's the attitude we need.
Amazingly, I hadn't made this connection before. And so I don't have the, quote or data in front of me, but I learned a while ago that when people are in charge for too long, like it's talking about presidents and people in that executive office, when they're in charge for more than 8 years, they actually start to lose their minds. Like they really can't handle it. And so the American system of maximum 2 presidential terms of 8 years total, that's about right. You really shouldn't have more than that. And if you want to have a little less, that might be a little better even. So I hadn't thought of it in terms of Congress. Like, they definitely have less power. If you're a member of Congress, you probably feel powerless a fair amount of the time if your party's not in power in the majority. But yeah, there's no way that those people who are in office for 15, 20 years don't have their perceptions of their place in the system wildly warped by being there way too long.
And they get complacent.
Yeah.
There's this niche book series called The Lord of the Rings. Have you guys heard it?
No.
But it's all about...
Is it sports?
It's not sports. You'd like it, Jay. Check it out. But
okay.
I mean, people have been talking about this for a long. Power corrupts, and you shouldn't have it for very long, or if at all. And there should be a lot of accountability, and there should be so many guardrails, because no matter how, any one of the four of us, if we were put in any one of their positions, probably give us some time might sound a little bit more like, Steny Hoyer than we do right now, because that's just the nature of it. And I think that needs to be talked about so much more in these discussions. Is we're not necessarily talking about the people themselves, although,
yeah,
I'm kind of talking about those people, but it's because they've been in those situations for so long that it's just naturally corrupting at a certain point. And I feel the same way about, I like AOC quite a bit. AOC has been in there a little while now, and we're getting further and further down the line to where how much more are her politics going to really align with mine? Really. But maybe she could be an exception. But we need to put guardrails in place for everyone, regardless of their political views.
I think AOC is pro-term limits, actually. I can't say that officially, but I thought that she had mentioned that.
So coming up next, we are doing what's, for us, a 2-part episode. For you, we're going to flow right into it. It turns out the DNC Executive Committee is going to have a big meeting, one of their, they only do 2 meetings a year. And turns out they're doing one the very next day after we were set to record. And we thought, okay, I guess we'd better watch that and give our thoughts. So up next, that's what we'll be doing. So right now, we don't know how that meeting went, but very soon we will. And I assume they're going to have announced a whole new slate of Democratic Party policies that will change the internal culture dramatically. That's my expectation. Any other guesses?
I have low expectations.
Status quo.
I think there's going to be really honest conversations that are going to right our ship.
That'll be nice.
Yeah. Well, in either case, the answer for those of us on the outside, I think, is to continue to push. Luckily, it's simple. You can do the self-care you need to do, consume the art you need to consume to keep yourself going and inspired. But in the end, nothing happens without pressure, even amongst those people who you generally agree with. Everyone needs to be pushed. Okay, we're back. We have witnessed the meeting through the magic of editing. A day has gone by. We now know everything that happened at the Democratic National Committee Executive Meeting. And oh boy, was it a thrill ride from beginning to end. First of all, thanks to Progressive Hub from Roots Action, they were the only media on site to stream or commentate on that meeting. The Democrats did stream it themselves on YouTube. Their comment section was turned off, which was noted and interesting. But a few logistical realities of this meeting was that it was in Little Rock, Arkansas. It's not a major hub of a city that's easy to get to. So Democrats barely got a quorum for the meeting. About half the executive committee managed to show up for this meeting that was scheduled to be maybe 3 hours, turned out to be an hour and 45 minutes, something like that. And I was lying. It wasn't a thrill ride from beginning to end. Basically, nothing happened at all, which is something to either critique or recognize as that was the plan all along. And maybe that being the plan all along is the thing to critique. And so we will briefly go over our experience of witnessing this meeting. Amanda, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I kept my expectations low, obviously, for multiple reasons, but also because I did understand that it probably wasn't going to be a raucous thrill ride. But, the hope was, based on some of the commentary, was like, it's a business meeting, basically, for the DNC. It's the business of the DNC. It's not a rules meeting, but that probably we should have expected some discussion about the future of the party, the urgency, the crisis, the emergency that we are living in. I did not hear anything like that. And it seemed very kind of self-congratulatory. Let's go around and say what everyone's doing and then pat everyone on the back, which, look, like, needs to happen in a professional organization. People need to get some kind of thank you and accolade for the work they're doing. But none of the work seemed that groundbreaking either. There weren't a ton of details. A lot of it was kind of high level. And so it's hard to know, like, is the work that is really needed happening? Or are we kind of just basically doing business as usual with a few tweaks and adjustments? Because if that's the case, we're screwed, because we are not in tweaks and adjustments phase. So yeah, it was a little concerning. Even if it wasn't supposed to be something that was going to have fireworks in it, it didn't seem to have much of anything that made me feel better in it. That's for sure.
Well, one of the things that I know I noted, and as well as like the commentators that were on the Root Section stream, like it was very much, we're going to present to you, and like little interaction as far as the other people in the room. So it definitely felt like a presentation, and they had a PowerPoint. And yeah, like I could be sarcastic and say it was a page turner, since Jay let us off that way. I will not. It was a very standard PowerPoint that felt like a lot of, this is what we're going to do, but not any kind of how. And I would have liked, of course, to see some discussion as well, Amanda.
Yeah. And, I mean, for the people who were there, I kind of felt bad for them. I was like, you made the trip. This could have been an email. So, sorry, you took the time.
Like, I love that the commentators emphasize that they pay out of their own pockets to attend these meetings. And like, yeah, I'd probably be a little upset that I got on a plane. There's not a lot of direct flights to Little Rock. So I imagine there's some logistics that weren't fun.
It sounds like they did have fun at karaoke the night before. So I guess that might have made it worth it. Yeah.
Worth the cost of admission. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of like it's a snake eating its own tail sort of situation. It's like nothing happened because nothing was supposed to happen. So it's disappointing that nothing happened, but we never should have expected it. And so the real problem is that there should have been a meeting scheduled where something would happen, but I'm trying to give as much benefit of the doubt as possible and trying to put myself in the mindset of a DNC Executive Committee member and think like, well, look, I mean, there was talk about democratizing the party, right? There's talk about, being more transparent and having more input. And so should big changes be discussed at the top level? Maybe not, they would think. That should be discussed at a committee level. Probably not online, because really no one's going to watch that. But, that should be discussed at a committee and then debated for weeks and then brought to a bigger meeting. And you could imagine how they would come to the conclusion like, well, we're not going to do anything to rock the boat because we're at the top. We're the Democratic Party. We're not supposed to be changing things from the top. And then at the same time, Ken Martin, the chair, he gave a couple of monologues that sounded fine. That we need to roll up our sleeves or throw some punches, or there were some specifics, like couple of specifics mentioned about, getting dark money out. And, in addition to, as a party, being more transparent than we have been. But, it was nothing that anyone could possibly get excited about. And so for me, that is the critique, is like, come on, dudes, you gotta do something. Like basically the existence of this meeting. And I mean, the only reason I even heard about it is because some very small article mentioned that it was happening. I was like, well, okay, we're going to do a whole show talking about Democrats. Might as well watch their meeting and see what they're up to. And it's like, okay, so this meeting is just reminding me that it's the very end of May and you haven't called an emergency meeting to fight fascism, you haven't pulled the whole party together and put the committees to work in a way that is transparent or that anyone knows is happening, so that they can come up with some ideas to pivot away from what has been done to whatever is decided eventually needs to be done in a Trump era, when, like, if you don't think it's an emergency, then you are not qualified to be in a position of influence within the opposition party whatsoever. So the things that were said that were kind of okay were platitudes, because there was no intention of saying anything other than platitudes. But there were platitudes that pointed in okay directions. All right, great. Like, it's a start. But how actually, logistically, structurally, are any of these things going to happen? So I'm just echoing what one of the commentators, from Progressive Hub, who was chatting on the feed about this, was pointing out, like, the next meeting is not scheduled till August. That's when the whole DNC will get together in August. And there are elections happening at the end of this year. So if they're going to wait until August to even discuss changes, then any changes that happen aren't even going to affect this year's elections. There are special elections that everyone should be getting ready for. And if changes need to be made, they're not going to be made in time. And so, okay, maybe a year and a half from now, they'll have made changes that influence what happens next year. It's just sort of maddening that as people are, like, flooding into the streets to demand action, the party that is the only opposition party available in America, there's not a sense of urgency. That's the grand takeaway, is, like, if you're going along with your meetings as usual and there aren't additional meetings being scheduled, then how should anyone feel like you're the ones to go to, or that you're, the conductor?
They haven't read the room.
Yeah, they have not read the room. Exactly. Like, there's energy out there that doesn't have a place to flow other than into the streets. And the Democratic Party is set up to take advantage of that energy somehow, but they're not making moves. They're not reacting in a way that could utilize that energy in any way.
Nina Turner jumped on the feed maybe about halfway through, and she had some great things to say. One of them in particular stuck with me. She said, we're not debating here about, like, one individual person. This isn't really only about Ken Martin and whether he's doing a good job or, any specific person in leadership. We're debating the rot of an entire system, is how she said it. And that is the truth. Like, the Democrats have not fully woken up to the fact, it seems, that the structure within their party has led us to this moment. It's not just like, oh, maybe we could do it better. No. I mean, blocking Bernie Sanders, putting up Joe Biden, all these things, and it was happening before that, all these things have led us to this point. And if a second Trump term does not shake you into being awake and realizing we need an overhaul, I don't know what to say. And the other thing Nina Turner said is, it's like someone begging for oxygen and then the DNC basically saying, like, I'll get back to you in a few days. It's this very, let's just take our time, no hurry, no urgency. And it makes me scared. I mean, it makes me angry, but it also makes me scared because, as Jay just said, they are the only opposition we have, the only actual opposition we have. And if they don't get it, that is not a good situation to be in.
I did like some of the points that were brought up, right? Like, there were things that were said that if we do that, that's great. So one of the things that was talking about is, like, investing more in the actual state infrastructure. And I really like that idea. I know that one of the commentators, again, to reference them, was talking about, the fact that we're spending overall $1 billion on Kamala Harris, campaign. And I think that also includes Joe Biden numbers as well. But then for states, like, they're looking at maybe a little over $200,000 being invested into them. But if the Democratic Party doesn't put stipulations in how that money gets spent, you're looking at $200,000 that will then mostly go to Senate races. Some of it will pass down to, Congress, and then, like, local and state races are going to get the crumbs. So I like the idea, but again, as we pointed out, it was a lot of this is what we're going to do, but not the how. And I think the how is so important. And again, like they might still be figuring it out.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem that Ken Martin believes in down ballot races. He said that.
Yes.
He went out of his way to say it. But that was a lot of what I felt during this call was Ken Martin's the only one with the energy, with like a little more of the fire. And he's got ideas about how he wants the party to operate. But then when you hear from the rest of the committee, everyone seems to be talking about small potatoes and not the things that are kind of dire. And that's what I mean. Like they need to shake everybody and be like, we're not doing things as business as usual anymore. But Ken seems to be the only one who has that message. So I have not heard it yet from other DNC members, even members of Congress. Like, I'm not hearing that fire in the belly, which is what we need.
Yeah. Which, of course, might, like that sort of stuff can come from the top, but someone new coming into the top of an organization, trying to infuse it with new energy and new direction, and then running into a brick wall of culture that has been established for decades is at the minimum a very difficult task and potentially impossible, particularly over the course of a short timeline. So, it's possible Ken Martin doesn't deserve the criticism for like not turning things around quickly enough, but that's what's so important about, I mean, Amanda, you already quoted what Nina Turner was saying, is like, it's not about any person. Yeah. It's not about any one of these people and what they're doing. It is about the way the structure is set up is not conducive to the kind of change we need. And then the culture is to not allow changes. So we've got an insufficient culture, and part of it is don't make changes. So Ken comes in, he's got some energy, he's got some ideas, and he might just be running in quicksand. But I mean, something that I think occurred to us as we were listening to Ken Martin, and he was describing, and he was on one of his monologues, and he was saying things that all make sense, but he was talking about investing in the party in a way that was like, we need to invest in party structures with a long-term vision as opposed to individual candidates who come and go. Because when we invest in the party as a structure, new candidates can come in, they can plug into the system, they can use our infrastructure to get elected. And what I did hearing that was Google, when was the Democratic Party founded? Like, we're 3 years away from their 200th anniversary, and Ken is giving a speech that sounds like he just invented the concept of a political party.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm tempted to flip out a little bit, but as we were chatting before we hit record, what I was realizing is that they did say lots of negative things about the party. You just had to read between the lines and hold a mirror up to it, right? Everything negative they said framed in the positive. So they said things like, congratulations to the state party that's going to move out of the building that has black mold. Like, clap, clap, clap. Yay. Yep. It was like, wow, that is a mirror image of how the fuck did we underinvest in the party so much that they've been working in an office with black mold, right? Mm-hmm. And if Ken is having to invent the concept of a political party, saying we're going to build an infrastructure, it's going to help candidates get elected, it's like, that is just a mirror image way of saying we have been falling on our faces, not doing the one job we're here to do. And the fact that we have to go back to basics is absurd. But like, those were the most positive things that he was saying that are like profoundly simple and obvious. And, and then a few things that are kind of new to the modern age, like get dark money out of the party, because at least we didn't have dark money in the way we do now 200 years ago.
It's like everyone knew there were huge gaps and big problems with the Democratic Party. And then we got to peek behind the curtain and got that story about Mississippi working in black mold. Like, that is horrifying. That is definitely a insider look I didn't need to have. Like, Never mind the fact that you're presenting it to executive leadership as if like, hey, look at the great thing we're doing. Like we're moving these people out of
so much success.
And how long were they working there? Like that's my ugh, God.
Yeah.
Not for this discussion, but that.
Yeah, no, you get these little bits and pieces and you're like, what have we been doing for the last decades? Like, how did this happen? And Judith Whitmer was on the discussion on Progressive Hub, and she was a former chair of the Nevada Democratic Party for, like 3 years or so, like 2021, 2023. And she mentioned how, we're talking about infrastructure. Part of that infrastructure for a long time has been bringing in consultants. And that's not just the Democrats. Republicans do it too. But in the Democratic Party, you can see it more and more, especially in the messaging. And we talked about how Kamala Harris's messaging changed very quickly once the consultants basically got a hold of her, right, in her campaign. And so Judith Whitmer mentioned that at the state level, the actual state parties are often run by consultants effectively. And in Nevada, I think it literally was and maybe still is. That's a huge problem and not part of a people first party. I mean, that is just, and not to mention the money being spent on these consultants, but the fact that they are literally in charge of the state structure of the party, that is, I mean, I didn't know that. And, maybe I should have, but I was quite shocked. And we talked a lot about the older politicians and who's dying off and whatnot. I mean, she kind of mentioned that Harry Reid's consultants are the ones still involved in the state level. He is no longer a member of Congress. I don't believe he's with us anymore. That's a problem. But it does expose how these things just linger, how the status quo stays the status quo, because nobody wants to rock the boat and the people who are already there are entrenched. And you just limp along. And, you'd hope that the first Trump administration everyone would have seen the writing on the wall. Like, geez, we are not doing things well. But no, it took another one. And I don't know, I'm hoping, they are our only hope, truly. And so I am just hoping that the energy kicks in. I mean, what Jay was saying about things not kicking in until August or the next meeting not being until August. Also, Ken Martin said, well, a lot of the things we're doing now aren't going to take effect until August. And that's too late. That's way too late. So I'm not feeling great, unfortunately.
Yeah. So to jump sort of on your theme about the contractors and the consultants, my favorite story was one of the commentators from Progressive Hub. His family has been sort of Democratic operatives for decades and decades. And so he told a story about his mother, who was, I think, a precinct captain or something that is sort of like that. A Democratic Party, local level, highly involved person. And he said that today, the Democratic Party pays millions, maybe tens of millions of dollars for contractors to do canvassing. And what they end up doing is they ship people around the country. So people from one part of the country fly out to another part of the country to do a paid job to canvass for political candidates. But that's a job that his mother did and that local volunteers should be doing to talk to, their actual neighbors. I live around the corner. I'm talking to you as your neighbor about this candidate who's running in our district. And that should be done for free. Those should be volunteers doing that because they're involved in the party and they care. But the party is so undemocratic structurally within itself that there isn't a way to really get involved. I mean, this is the perpetual complaint is what does it mean to be a Democrat? It means you're on a mailing list and you get asked for money.
Constantly.
You don't get asked for your input. You don't get asked for your volunteer hours. And I mean, it is as though they are unaware that there is pent up energy that people want to put into politics, but don't have a place to put it. And the Democratic Party has closed the doors that people would happily walk through to spend their political energy to help the Democratic candidates in their neighborhood or state or whatever win. And so all I can think of, and this is what we don't have insider details on, but ever since, Amanda, you used to work at a big corporation that contracted with the government. And from you, I learned the term operational entanglement. And I just think
favorite buzzword,
people have been complaining about contractors working with the Democratic Party and the consultants for decades. There's no way that there is not an element of operational entanglement,
absolutely,
which is the conscious strategy to make oneself as a contractor indispensable to your client in a way that is not literally indispensable. Yeah, they could do it without you, but we're going to create a scenario and entangle ourselves enough so that when it's time to renew that contract, they're we could do it without you, but it would be such a pain in the ass to untangle our relationship. Whatever, just renew it. Just renew the contract. It's easier.
Yep.
And that's where we are.
So that was one of the things I'm glad that you brought up, specifically consultants and contractors doing work that was otherwise volunteer work. So my question for them, and obviously this is a wait and see, but as much as they use the words grassroots and organizing, I do want to see what that looks like. Are they going to continue relying on those, or are they actually having grassroots efforts that they're plugging in?
Yeah.
Again, we're going to have to hold the space.
You're right. There was a lot of talk about that. They threw that word around left and right. And I don't know what the details are on that. And maybe this wasn't the meeting where they outlined them, but I'm a little nervous. I mean, look, Ken Martin ran against Ben Wickler, who is the state chair in Wisconsin, and just did an incredible job rebuilding Wisconsin's Democratic Party and infrastructure. And, I didn't really have a super strong opinion one way or the other, but, I know Ben Wickler and know the work he's done. And I was, kind of hoping that he would be the guy. It's Ken Martin. I don't know as much about Ken Martin, but I hope that Ken Martin is a smart enough person to recognize that they need to go find where things have worked, what strategy has been implemented that has worked. And he mentioned, defeating Elon Musk's millions of dollars in the Wisconsin Supreme Court election. Great. A lot of the reason that could happen is because of the years of work of Ben Wickler. So I hope that there is a relationship there and they're learning, what did Ben do in Wisconsin? How can we do that everywhere? How do we replicate this? I'd be shocked if it wasn't happening, but you can't really put anything past them. So that's the kind of stuff when they talk about building state infrastructure, I hope they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. I hope they are looking to where this stuff works. AOC constantly tries to tell members of her party how to campaign in the way that she does that is incredibly effective and what she did to build the kind of support she has. And it falls on deaf ears. She says this often, she cannot convince anyone to look at the way that she does politics, which is working really well. Now, would it work in every place? Maybe not, but it's probably replicatable in some way. And that's part of that, just the deep, deep status quo. We do things this way. We don't want to change them. That has got to stop. And this didn't make me hopeful, but I don't know. I guess they're going to do it more slowly, which will make me crazy.
Well,
fresh
and to make this
fresh blood.
I was to make this personal, we're definitely going to see come Georgia, because we have the governor race coming up and we have a Senate race. So for my sake, since I live in the state, I really hope that as we move forward, they're looking at strategic changes and that they are, keying in again to that grassroots organizing, because I do think Georgia has a very rich history of grassroots. So if we can get, the help behind it, I think this is a really good battleground area to kind of run a strategy and prep for the presidential election eventually.
So Amanda mentioned hope, little bit of maybe some hope, but also hedging bets against having too much hope. But as always, hope is not a strategy. It doesn't matter whether you have hope or not. The point is push.
Yep.
And
Ken Martin even said that, actually.
Ken Martin said it.
Jay's message.
Exactly. So that is the only answer. It is not sit back and watch and wring our hands and complain, which maybe it sounds like we're doing, but it is part of a message to keep the pressure on. You have to push. If we want them to change, it only will happen with pressure.
Mm-hmm. So I do want to mention that I rage wrote an email to the DNC, and I think anybody who has an opinion about what they're doing and what they should do should as well, might as well. They do have a contact page. They have a category for you have feedback or suggestions. So go ahead. You can go to democrats.org/contact-us and write them an email. I mean, there are other ways. You can do lots of other things too, but that's one way to reach out and tell other people to do the same.
And right now we have a vague mention of getting dark money out, but maybe if we show that it's a priority for the party, we'll actually see some action behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Did we solve it? I think we solved it.
I'm like, I don't know if I feel better or not, but I think we did the best we could.
Be better, Democrats.
Well, and that was Joe Biden's plan in the last election. He was just going to do the best he could, and he'd be happy with that, regardless of the outcome. So,
oh God, you had to cringe it.
And so, if he's our standard bearer, and that's the bar we were looking to cross, then we definitely succeeded today.
You did good, Joe.
Oh boy. And on that note, if you would like to chime in, I mean, honestly, write to the Democratic Party instead of us, but, feel free to let us know what you wrote to the Democratic Party. You can leave us a message via text or voicemail at 202-999-3991 or send an email to j@bestofleft.com. So thanks for listening. And remember that, yes, this is all really happening. So continue to be decent, act like what you do and say matters, and do what matters most.
They marched in the streets with banners held high, voices united under one clear sky. But the years have shown the fight's not done. The work of justice has just begun. Push, push through the weight of the years. Push, push past the doubt and the fears. The old world is dying, the new struggles to start. Now we're taking the stage to play our part. Art is a mirror.
It shows us the pain, but it won't build the bridges or break the chains. We've waited in line, we've tried the old tools, but the time has come to write new rules.
Push, push through the weight of the years. Push, push past the doubt and the fears. The old world is dying, the new struggles to start. Now we're taking the stage to play our part. The old guard stands firm on foundations of sand, resisting the change that is sweeping the land. The push of our movement is a current so strong, it'll break down the walls that have stood for too long. Push, push through the weight of the years. Push, push past the doubt and the fears. The old world is dying, the new struggles to start. We're not waiting our turn to play our part. The old world is dying, the new struggles to start. We're taking the stage to play our part.